Kail Lowry has been pretty mysterious about her boyfriend and possible baby daddy Elijah Scott, but details about his recent past have just been revealed and they're absolutely shocking. So why exactly has Kail been so secretive about Elijah? The truth about what his life was like before he met her is honestly bizarre, so let's get into it. In April 2022, we first found out that Kail and Elijah were dating. It was actually Kail's third baby daddy, Chris Lopez, who publicly announced the relationship on social media. He was upset by how quickly his sons had met Elijah, but that was far from his only concern. Elijah had already moved in with Kail and her kids, despite the couple only having been together for about a month at that point. But apparently, Kail had become interested in Elijah right after they first met in an unbelievable way. It turns out that they had both moved into the same Delaware neighborhood around the same time. In December 2021, Elijah bought a 3-bedroom home for $280,000. The following month, Kail moved into her newly built mansion, which was right next door to Elijah's house. During a June 2022 episode of Kail's Barely Famous podcast, she explained that they started out just being neighbors, but obviously it wasn't long before they became romantically involved. However, what Elijah did next raised some major red flags with Kail's followers. After he moved in with Kail and her sons, he decided to rent out his house. It seemed like a smart move on his part instead of just selling it right away, but his decision also made a lot of people question his motives for a surprising reason. Not only, no one really knew anything about Elijah at the time. Other than that, he was 23 years old, which was way younger than 30-year-old Kail, but it seemed like he was living rent-free in her house. And now that court documents from Elijah's past have been released, more people than ever are convinced that his intentions are seriously shady. Believe it or not, Elijah has been married before. According to the US Sun, he was actually newly divorced when he and Kail first met as neighbors, but the court documents have exposed way more than just his divorce timeline. What else has been revealed is truly insane. Elijah filed for divorce from his now ex-wife Kayla in May 2021. He claimed that they had grown apart after getting married in March 2018 and had been separated since June 2020. Neither of them were ordered to pay spousal support, which I'm sure was a huge relief to Elijah considering his shocking financial situation. Elijah and Kayla were living in Hawaii while they were together, and he was working as a mechanic in the army. At the time, he was making around $6,250 each month, while his monthly expenses added up to about $4,880. But he wasn't saving much money at all because of his enormous debt. When Elijah's divorce was finalized in June 2021, the total amount of debt he was in was around $70,537. He owed a whopping $55,515 in car payments, about $8,178 in Chase and Capital One credit card bills, and more. Interestingly, when Elijah first met Kail, she was still appearing regularly on Teen Mom 2. Some people have even speculated that he was trying to wipe out his debt with her MTV paychecks. But what happened in the very beginning of their relationship was really concerning. Toward the end of April 2022, Kail made a big unexpected purchase. She shared on her Instagram story that she had just bought a 2018 Chevrolet Silverado 2500 heavy-duty truck, which was incredibly unusual. As most of us already know, Kail and Elijah already welcomed a baby boy last November, and they're supposedly expecting twins later this year. Not to mention, most of her sons are involved in at least one sport, which is why she's almost always driven SUVs. Kail had just gotten a new SUV in 2021, so what would she need a truck for, especially since she obviously wouldn't be able to transport all her kids and their athletic equipment in it. Many people believe that Kail had most likely bought the truck especially for Elijah. At around the same time, he listed his 2020 Dodge Daytona 392 car on Facebook Marketplace for $50,000. It's unknown how much he actually sold it for, but it definitely didn't cover the cost of the truck. According to the truck's original listing, the asking price was around $67,000. So even if Elijah gave Kail $50,000 from his car sale, there was still a lot more money owed on the truck. It's also possible that he put the money from the sale down to cover his outstanding car payments. But what happened a few weeks later was absolutely unreal. If Elijah really had been counting on Kail's MTV money to help him erase the rest of his debt, he was probably in for a surprise. In May 2022, she announced that she was quitting Teen Mom 2 for good, but that wasn't her only shocking career news. 2 months later, Kail revealed that she and Lindsay Chrisley had just signed a $2 million contract to continue their coffee Convo's podcast. And that's only one of Kail's 3 podcasts, which clearly make a decent amount of money. But even though it sounds like Elijah financially lucked out, the money he's seeing now might not last forever. In 2021, Kail confessed that she had a bad habit of impulsively spending big amounts of money. She hadn't started saving a lot of her income until 2020 during the COVID pandemic. Not to mention, her lifestyle has been extremely expensive for years. Kail regularly goes on international vacations and she takes her kids on trips all the time as well. She also has at least one nanny and is constantly flaunting new items online. And then there's her new extravagant mansion, which reportedly cost around $1 million. But no matter how much money Kail spends on herself and the kids, she apparently spends just as much on Elijah. During a recent episode of her Baby Mama's No Drama podcast, Kail talked about her expensive relationship habit. She claimed that she has a pattern of always doing too much for her boyfriends, and that includes spending a ton of money on them.
You come home from the bowling alley on your bike one day and you got an I-8 in your driveway.
Even considering Kail's potential income, that's pretty ridiculous, especially considering the fact that Elijah is reportedly no longer enlisted in the military. During the pandemic, he had been trying to make money by posting about his mechanic skills on Facebook, but it sounds like that didn't exactly go according to plan. Kail mentioned that Elijah was working as a construction worker in one of her Instagram stories from June 2022, but ever since then, she hasn't really talked about his job or personal life. She barely said anything about him at all for an honestly crazy reason. In March, texts involving someone claiming to be close to one of Kail's first 3 baby daddies were released. They revealed that Elijah was strictly forbidding Kail from publicly sharing any photos or details about their alleged baby. Elijah supposedly doesn't want anything to do with the spotlight, and he wants to keep his and Kail's rumored son out of the public eye as well. Honestly, the real reason why he's so against her sharing that information is completely understandable. Apparently, Elijah doesn't want his child to go through the cruel criticism that Kail's other kids have experienced from social media users and reality TV viewers. But there's no telling how long Kail will respect Elijah's boundaries since they haven't been seen eye to eye for a few months. During an episode of Comfy Convos from August, Kail admitted that Elijah would like to get married someday. However, she isn't exactly excited to get married again, especially after her nasty divorce from Javi. But that's not the only sign that there could be trouble in their relationship. Elijah is very family oriented and he has always been super close with his parents and siblings. Kail is the total opposite and wasn't all that interested in meeting his family. But even though they all seem to get along at first, that might not be the case now. Just a few months ago, Kail revealed that she had found some upsetting texts on Elijah's phone. She explained that the messages were between him and his parents, who were not happy with her. It turns out she and Elijah got into a huge fight that ended in a pretty alarming way. Kail allegedly told Elijah that his parents were never allowed to step foot in her house again since he lives with her and they supposedly have at least one child together. That's going to be a huge problem if they can't work things out. It sounds like Kail and Elijah have quite a few differences that might cause them to seriously clash in the future. It doesn't help that Elijah looks totally uninterested whenever Kail puts pictures or videos of him on social media. Some people think that Elijah appears miserable most of the time because he really was just with Kail for the money. He was able to live rent-free in her mansion, and she even bought him a nice truck right away. But now that they reportedly have one child together and could be having 2 more soon, maybe he feels like he has to stay. After all, she has a habit of publicly airing her ex's dirty laundry, and he clearly wants privacy for himself and his kids. Kail and Elijah's relationship is definitely interesting, but the latest details about his divorce and outstanding debts are really insane. But now I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Elijah has been using Kail to pay off his massive debt? What are your thoughts on the future of the relationship considering how different many of their core values seem to be? Let me know in the comments below.